Well, let me say good morning to all of you, and welcome to the Chamber, and thank the Chamber for doing this, and thank them for their defense of the free enterprise system in America. You know, before I came here, as Lisa pointed out, I used to run a small business. I actually grew up in a small business. My dad owned a bar. You know, and I tell people all the lessons I learned growing up are the lessons I need to do my job today. You know, I grew up in a family where I had 11 brothers and sisters. You have to learn to get along with each other and get things done together, get things done as a family. Growing up around a bar, I mopped floors, did dishes, waited tables, tended bar. You know, you have to learn to deal with every character that walks in the door. Trust me, I need all the skills I learned growing up to do my job. But I came here as, you know, a small business guy who thought the government was too big, thought it spent too much, and didn't think anybody here in Washington was holding it accountable. And as I stand here this morning, I don't feel one bit differently than the day I showed up here 20 years ago. Someone as a small business person fighting for a smaller, less costly, and more accountable government here in Washington. You know, the House has been focused on trying to create a better environment for job creation all year. This week, we're going to move a bill to repeal the 3% withholding tax on any business that does business with any level of the government. It's a giant mandate on every government agency and government entity because they've got to withhold 3% of everything they pay to people in the private sector. This is not going to help job creation. It's a big, costly mandate. The president has called for its repeal, while he's called for it to be pushed off for another year. This will be the third time we've pushed it off. We think it's just time to repeal it. But again, part of our jobs bill, part of the president's jobs bill. Later this week, we'll also, well, I think it might be next week, we're going to be moving the REINS Act. It really says something very simple. If there's a new government regulation that's going to cost at least $100 million, a new tax on the private sector, if you will, it has to receive an up or down vote in the United States Congress. Today, there are 219 such rules that are sitting in these agencies, ready to come rolling out and to impose new costs on a private sector that's struggling to keep this head above water and to create jobs. All of this is built on efforts that we've worked with the Chamber. You know, several weeks ago we passed the 3 free trade agreements for Colombia, Panama, and South Korea. Something, again, part of our jobs bill and something that the president has called for as well. And I'm glad that we've got them passed in one day, and glad the president signed them into law. But we've passed many bipartisan bills that are out of the House that are sitting over in the United States Senate. At least 15 bills thus far that would help America's job creators if the United States Senate would act. You know, we offered our plan for America's job creators back in May. Our plan to put more Americans back to work. We've been working it all year, but in May we formalized this. And, you know, the president was running around in September saying, well, the Republicans have no plan. They have no plan. Well, let me tell you, I had to call the president and remind him that we had a plan, that I've talked to him about our plan and his plan. And while, you know, we have very different beliefs between the two parties, the American people expect us to find enough common ground to move the ball down the field. And so we're going to continue to do what the American people sent us here to do. We pledged in our Pledge to America a year ago that our job was to listen to the American people and to follow their will, and we will continue to do that. You know, we had about a dozen job creators that we invited to Washington to listen to the president's speech. One of those job creators was the president of Gibson Guitars, somebody that you're going to hear from later today, where the federal government raided his business because he's buying imported wood, and some dispute over a law of where the country where it's shipped from, not a law here in the United States. But it's cost this company millions of dollars because of this raid by the federal government. Seems like an overly heavy-handed way of doing business, but I'm sure you'll hear the story later on today. You're also going to hear from Nikki Haley, governor of South Carolina. In her state, Boeing completed a plant that would create thousands of new jobs, and yet a federal agency is suing to stop that plant from actually operating. Listen, I've been around the government for quite a while, but I have never seen actions like this in my entire career. This is a federal regulatory onslaught like no one has ever seen. You know, the president came to Cincinnati to stand in front of a bridge that his jobs plan wouldn't help. But while he was there, he did it from a concrete plant that is going to be suffering under more undue and burdensome government regulations on cement manufacturers. You know, Gallup recently asked small businesses around the country what was their number one concern. And it might not surprise you to know that it was the continuing regulatory onslaught that's coming out of Washington, D.C. Our job in the Congress is to hold the administrative branch accountable. We've had more oversight hearings this year than we've had in the 20 years that I've been here in Washington. Why? Because I called all the would-be and wannabe committee chairmen a year ago and said, listen, if you're going to have this job or you want this job, you should know what my expectations are. And I do believe that the government or the Congress has not done as an effective job of providing oversight of these executive branch agencies as we're required to do under the Constitution. And so we're doing our oversight. We're trying to do a better job of telling our story about what's happening, but trying to hold these regulators' feet to the fire. Listen, I don't want dirty air. I don't want dirty water. Come on. It's about what makes sense in order for America to be able to compete. And if we can compete and compete successfully, more Americans are going to be back to work. But if you look at our three big areas, I've talked an awful lot about regulations. The second big part of our plan is we've got to fix our tax system. Our tax system is not competitive. We've got the highest corporate tax rate in the world, and it needs to be dealt with. Our target is to get to a top rate of 25% for business income and a top rate of 25% for personal income. And to do that by weeding out a lot of the overgrowth in deductions, credits, and special carve-outs. Might not surprise you, but there have been 5,000 changes to our tax code over the last 10 years. Now, how many of those 5,000 changes do you think people were lobbying for who wanted to pay higher taxes? I don't even think Warren Buffett was here lobbying for higher taxes than any of these bills. But if we're serious about getting our economy going again and making America more competitive, we have got to deal with our tax system. And the third big part of our plan is to get the burden of our debt and our budget deficit under control. It's acting as a wet blanket over our economy. And I think that we've taken steps all year to reduce the discretionary portion of our budget, about $1.2 trillion over the next 10 years of savings. But the Deficit Reduction Committee, or the so-called Super Committee, they're to come up with $1.2 to $1.5 trillion in further reductions, expected mostly to be out of mandatory spending programs. And I can tell you that these 12 members, Democrats and Republicans, have continued to work very diligently trying to come to some agreement. Now, I can just say that, having been through these discussions with the president all year and the Senate leadership all year, the reluctance to do what we know has to be done continues to mystify me. And this is not rocket science. In 1990, when I was a candidate for Congress for the first time, I said this. I said the sooner we deal with our entitlement programs and to make the necessary changes so that these programs are sustainable for the long term, the easier it will be to make those changes. Well, here it is 21 years later, and what have we done? Virtually nothing. And as a result, we're chasing a train that's running away from us. 10,000 baby boomers are retiring every single day. That's 10,000 more people on Medicare, 10,000 more people on Social Security, people living a lot longer accessing Medicaid services. And as a result, it's made our job that much more difficult to try to bring some fiscal sanity to Washington, D.C. But if we're going to create a better environment for job creators in America, we've got to deal with the excessive regulations. We've got to deal with a tax code that's not competitive, and we've got to deal with our overburdening debt. Now, you know, a lot of people say, Boehner, how do you do this every day? Well, you know, I was one of those people who was born with a glass half full. I mean, I'm the optimist. Hell, if I wasn't an optimist, I'd have never made it this far. And I do believe that America's brighter days are still ahead of us. But it's going to take hard work on the part of the American people and their elected representatives to make sure that the American dream is alive and well for our kids and our grandkids. God bless you, and have a great conference.